So we have some high technological intervention involving the use of fans, trying to cool down the equipment that's causing us the difficulties. Hopefully people online can hear us now. So we will move to the debate very shortly. But just before we do that, I just invite Barry Potter, Director, just to make a couple of comments, observations in respect of the process going forward that I think is very helpful and should inform our debate and our resolutions here. So over to you, Barry.
Thank you, Chair. And if I might just address a couple of things. The first one is to make sure we acknowledge the work that Robert Simpson and his team, Elise and Harry, have done, and the AT team with Hamish Bunn and Nikki and Mark. It's been an incredible workload that they've taken on. They've worked weekends, as Robert said, worked very late at night. I know the time frame is very compressed and the information only became available this morning, but they have been exceptional in the hours that they've put in, and it's important we acknowledge that. So thank you very much to the team and the way they've worked together. The second point is to just flag how the recommendations are structured here, and the way they're structured comes out of the workshop and out of engagement with council laws, which was to get the recommendations, the detailed recommendations for the response to the GPS as a total package and consider them as a total package. That's been the drive behind this. That's the way the recommendations are structured, and hence you'll see them on the wall there. That's the approach that the team have taken as I pulled this together. So thank you, Chair.
Okay. So thank you for that, Barry. So as we're told earlier, that the way the resolutions or the recommendations are packaged, it's in themes, and we really don't want to start picking individual bits apart, because we've structured this work that it goes in as a submission as a whole. There may well be parts people don't agree with, but really the vote and debate is on the balance, the overall tone of the submission, and whether you support it or not. So with that in end, we have the recommendation moved by the Mayor, seconded by Councillor Fletcher. So over to you, Mr. Mayor, to kick off the debate.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for everyone's input. And I agree with Robert and his team have done a good job, along with the AT people. This is a submission of Auckland Council and AT here. We didn't want two separate ones. We've agreed that we are reducing a number of people in the whole transport thing, which is crowded. So we're going to have one Auckland voice. I think the point of this, it's a submission to influence a new government who've put out their policy, which has significant changes from the past, and we wanting to support the bits we like, change little bits here and there that we don't, and point out the impacts of some of that stuff, which is probably negative in some ways. I think the tone of this is excellent. There's no sense throwing a rock at the person who's got the money, but we're just pointing out bits and pieces that are there, that are not there. The most important one that wasn't there was the integrated transport plan, something which the government and the Prime Minister have agreed to, but we do want to put that in there. There are lots of things that most of us can support, and there's bound to be things that annoy some members, which I think we've really got it about right, because we're never going to get 100% agreement on every single part of this. With regards to, for instance, the safety thing increase, we heard that, removing some of the cost of the expensive stuff we put in might increase the number of people who are hurt. I think increasing policing will have a balancing effect. I know that for instance, in some parts of Auckland, and there's very low levels of compliance with registration and warrants of fitness as well. So there's a balance to this. We're no longer a rich country where the government can just print off money to fill everything up. The fare box question raised by Councillor Williamson's fair, that it's been below what it should be, and they say we've got to put it up. But so well, people won't come. It's almost inevitable the cost of driving a car is going to go up at the same time anyhow. So it's a relative thing. There's the freight industry there that seem to have got off a bit light. They do damage our roads. There isn't quite enough there for me in terms of shifting freight to rail, but I'm sure I know that there are other members here who are quite unhappy about the lack of emphasis on climate and other things. We have there's been worry about footpaths, but remember, 50% of our air roads are rural roads, and they never have footpaths. And those people will be very pleased to see some improvement to the road services. So it's a mixture. And I think that on balance, we have raised, and carefully in here with Robert's leadership, we have raised and pointed out the things that we don't feel are thought through or are good for us, but we have pointed out those things which are improved. There are some things in here that are completely annoy me, but I'm quite happy to live with those because I know they're so supported by other people. And I'm calling on you all to think across the other way. I think it's a very balanced, well-prepared document in a short period of time. And I support the thing in whole, even if I don't support every bit of it in part. And I think that I'm calling upon you to behave in that manner rather than worry what about 87B or 23H. It's a good overall document. It is to influence the government's behaviour. I have had a discussion with the Minister saying that we are preparing a document which is balanced. It will point out the things that members are concerned about, and it will support bits and pieces that we think are quite fair. And we will remind him of the importance of the integrated transport plan, which he has accepted. But it is the government, and they are entitled to raise the cash and spend it as they wish. So, and one of the things I've always taught in business is to always get on with the person with the money. So I think it's just the right approach, and I encourage you all to see it as a document in toto rather than a collection of 138 sub-clauses, some of which may piss you off or not. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Fletcher, would you like to speak at this stage?
I'll reserve my right to later in the
Okay,
debate.
so Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Essentially, I was responding to comments from the questions and comments of Councillor Williamson. So they are essentially general. I take on board Mr Potter's comments about the lack of time for staff, but nonetheless, I think Councillor Williamson's complaint about the lateness and the short time we've had to look at this document is reasonable, and we need to ensure that this doesn't happen again. Councillor Williamson made some interesting comments about fare box recovery and the ratio. In Auckland, the ratio of fare box recovery has always been much lower than, say, Wellington. Wellington always was able to meet 50%. The best I think AT got, and that was in 2016, was about 32 or 30 or 33% max, normally in the 20s. But I do recall in 2016 pointing out that AT was including non-subsidised and non-contracted services in its numbers, which made things looked a little bit better than they were. The other point I want to make is that the access charges that Councillor Williamson raised with Kiwi Rail and this is my comments are all about rail essentially, amount to some $600 million over time. They are expensive. They're not cheap. And yet, when it came to track repairs and then this rail rebuild project, this has been funded by special grants from the Minister of Transport, not from the $600 million or so that this council via AT pays KiwiRail. What KiwiRail did with that money is unknown, but obviously it got spread around the business. The point I'm making is we are paying expensive access charges for a rail network that is not fit for purpose and evidently hasn't been fit for purpose for some years. And that, I believe, means the council needs to be, and AT in particular, needs to ensure that the money we pay for access for a fit for purpose network is spent to ensure that the network is fit for purpose. And that brings me to our rail patronage and our situation, which has not recovered at all from COVID, and that is due to the rail network obviously not being fit for purpose and being periodically closed for significant periods of time. I would make the point that in regard to our PT performance, yes, we can argue with the government, and that's fair enough, and point out where the government is going wrong, which is also our right. However, we need to focus our critical gaze more closely at ourselves and AT. AT in terms of COVID, which was also raised here this morning, has still not recovered its PT levels to pre-COVID levels. And an argument has been made, which I think is reasonable, that there is behaviour change in terms of commuting. However, when it comes to our roads, they are being overloaded right now. Our PT is underperforming. AT is proud to say that we're 90% back to where we were in 2019. 90% is about 10 million passenger trips per year below what we were achieving before. And yet, and here's the problem, the cost of all this has gone up. So coming back to where I started on fare box recovery, one of the variables is the way we assess our fare box recovery, but another variable compared to, say, Wellington, or at least in the past, is that our costs are significantly more than Wellington's, in particular for rail, and yet our patronage now is even lower. So I think in criticising the government over its GPS, we also should be focusing on our own performance, which is, I believe, continues to be substandard when it comes to the provision of public transport. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Ferry.
Oh, kia ora, Chair. Apologies for the mask. I'm in a house with COVID and I don't have it yet, and I'm keen to keep it that way, although I am symptomatic, so we'll see. Hopefully you can still hear me okay. I just wanted to, I guess, find myself in the odd position of echoing the Mayor's thoughts on this, where just the immense amount of work that staff have put in, the balance that I feel that they've reached, particularly after our lengthy workshop chaired by Councillor Fletcher on this last week to try and find some consensus. I think this is a really... I'm quite startled actually with the quality that staff have been able to produce in such a short time, and note that also we were given the opportunity, having been given the draft on Friday, to send in feedback over the weekend, which I took the chance to send a little bit in. So I think I find myself, as I say, agreeing with the Mayor. There are bits here that I don't like very much, and I will just briefly address a couple of those, which is particularly around the safety issues. I would have liked to have seen, as suggested by all aboard, some more specific wording around and the specific recommendations around school transport, safety around people getting to and from school, and noting the huge economic benefits as outlined for that. We all notice how much nicer it is on the transport networks on the school holidays. Imagine if we could have that on school days too, and we could if we had more government support for investment in that space. The other thing I just wanted to mention is the quite recent commitment by this organisation to the TERP and also to Te Tariki Tawhiri, much more recent than a 2016 commitment to a specific project, but something that we've done in the last term, and still remains a really high priority for us as an organisation, and good to see that being given due attention in the submission. So huge thanks to the staff. Thank you to Councillors Fletcher and Watson for leading us through this and getting us to a point where I think we've got a document that I would hope everyone can vote for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferry. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. And I had written down here to say thank you to the staff to remind myself, because I can see how much work's been done. I'm beginning to get an understanding of the pressures in this place on staff. That said, I don't understand any of this stuff. You know, I've only been here 18 months. There's pages and pages of stuff. Forget all the timing issues. I tried Googling stuff myself. We've got policies back there in 2012, Auckland Transport Alignment Project in 2018. We've got all the stuff we're talking about now. It all sounds the same, and I don't have the thick end of a decade worth of experience to pull out information that goes back 8 years. So, you know, I have to sit here and do my job for the public. I take comments out of the discussion, which I link into. One of them, intelligent transport system. That's great. On Titirangi Road right now, there are some people who had their own 6 families, their own personal warning system set into the road. So on a blind corner, it's been there for like 40 years. 10 years ago, they resealed the road, ripped it out, and it didn't work, and Auckland Transport said sorry and put it back. This time they've ripped it out and said it was never there, you're lying. That was an intelligent transport system, we just even forgot about it. If the private sector had outcomes like that, they wouldn't get paid. And my gut feel, which I have to run by on this, is that it looks like the government's putting the financial thumbscrews on Auckland Transport and Council. And whether that's right or wrong, the word I would be told by the people to say here is, stop building speed humps. Because you try to fill up a room of people and give them this debate in the public, and the room will be empty in 15 minutes. Everyone's gone. When you walk outside, that's all they'll say. Stop building bloody speed humps. And they understand it right down to the bottom line of all this academia. And they sum it up in that term. We've got to listen to them. I'm being asked on their behalf to stand blindfolded in front of a minefield with no gaps between the mines and wondering whether my right or left leg will get blown off first. I will be voting no to this, because if in doubt, don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor Henderson.
Hey, thanks, Chair. Look, I'm really stoked about our direction and just want to echo those words around thanking staff for their hard work. It's pretty tough when you layer the hours in, but also how politically charged this kind of stuff can be. So what staff did was they've merely followed what we've told them to do over several terms in our votes and in feedback from the public, etc. So I just want to thank you for that. I'd also recommend the local board submissions. I think some really fantastic analysis. I'd suggest they be appended to our submission directly if we don't already do that. Look, briefly, I am supporting it today, and I'd suggest that we put politics aside on our transport system, and regrettably I find the GPS puts politics over evidence-based approaches. I want to zero in on a couple of aspects of that. It's not the full document, but I hope that some of my colleagues will jump in and help out on that one. I want to talk about disability, right? I asked about that earlier, and too often we make decisions at all levels of government without thinking about its impact on disabled Aucklanders. I want to recommend a study talking about an evidence approach. Transport Experiences of Disabled People in Aotearoa, New Zealand, commissioned by Kotahi in 2022. It sets out the biggest challenges for our disabled residents, that being followed by problems with accessibility of footpaths and public transport. Quoting here from the report, a lack of available bus services was the most common challenge mentioned by respondents. Buses were either not provided, not close enough to walk to, or too inconvenient to catch. Disabled people fear they are being left behind in planning for sustainable city centres. I echo those words. They're being told in this GPS, economic factors override your basic needs to live in our city. People tend to extrapolate that group to talk about vulnerable users and include groups like children going to school and getting around the city. This GPS and the general transport policies around makes the trek to school more dangerous, more inconvenient, and more expensive. Speed tables and slow speed zones get a lot of press around here, but I just want to remind everyone they don't get built for no reason. There isn't some snidey whiplash figure going around Auckland looking at ways to slow down cars. That doesn't happen. Speed tables are there because schools ask for them. They ask me for them, right? For those that want to make politics out of that, well, when the next primary school principal emails asking for help, I'll send it straight to them for an explanation, straight to them. In a city where our death and serious injury statistics are shameful and immoral, I'm a father myself. I just want my kids to walk to school safely. We in this country love the per capita tables, and we're talking about the Olympics and all that kind of stuff. That always comes up. Well, New Zealand's near the top when we're talking about per capita and the medals. Well, there was something last month that came out. We topped another per capita table. This one was no cause for celebration, though. This was the highest rate of car ownership on the planet per capita. What's more, we actually grew in rates of ownership by one of the fastest in the world, the fastest for a Western country. It's little wonder that our country has a productivity problem in this country. We've been talking about that for a long time, because we're all stuck in traffic. And to build mega highways to carve through communities will not help. The evidence of over 100 years of transport planning will prove that. This GPS barely mentions climate change at all. Imagine that, an existential threat, a situation that will result in the first generation to have a worse quality of life than their parents, barely mentioned. The fact is this GPS locks in huge carbon emissions, both in terms of sunk carbon of mega roads and an increasing commitment to vehicle transport and a hack and slash at any alternative modes of transport to get around the city. That, to me, is nothing more than climate vandalism. Finally, I want to talk about the public transport fares. It's something I talk a lot about around here. We're talking about an up to 136% rise. Is this action on cost of living? Our services cut to deny access to hundreds of thousands of Aucklanders. Is this action on the cost of living? If this gets passed as is, it will take money out of the pockets of Aucklanders in a crisis, or it will rip away their opportunity for transport choice, probably some combination of both. And of course, we know the people it will affect the most. It'll affect suburban Aucklanders the most. A lot of us represent those communities. It'll affect Māori and Pacific communities the most. It'll affect people living close to the line the most. I'm glad that through this sub, Aucklanders are trying to stitch together a transport system that benefits a modern world city. I want to thank staff again for that. A city that cuts your congestion and gets you around as cheaply and efficiently as possible. I want to borrow a phrase from the All Aboard group that presented earlier. The 3 Cs, cost, congestion and carbon. That's a very wise direction, and that's something that we should be thinking about around this table. Kia ora, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Hills.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. If this GPS stays in its current form, it represents a dramatic step backwards for Auckland and New Zealand. I'm hoping that the Minister and the Government will see what a disaster this is for our city. Evidence shows that our partnership with Māori doesn't exist. Our obligations under the treaty don't exist. The proposed GPS means more congestion, more deaths, more serious injuries, more kids hit by speeding vehicles, more carbon emissions, less access for people of all ages to walk around the communities easily and safely. Along with the $1.2 billion cut from the regional fuel tax, it means we will not be able to fund our current planned infrastructure, let alone the aspirations of Aucklanders. The GPS removes all and any focus we had on climate change. The TERP and Te Tarakia Tāwhiri, Auckland's climate plan, are based on well-supported scientific evidence to ensure we reduce our fair share of emissions. The targets are based on the Paris Agreement signed by the last national government. All Aucklanders should expect we aim for those targets that political leaders have already signed up to. Not only are the children and young people losing their newly found independence next month when free kids travel and half-price fares are removed, the government's potential $500 million cuts to public transport will have a crippling effect on the back pockets of all Aucklanders. Because you can bet the 90 people that were on the bus with me this morning, half of them will not be able to afford the $10 each way to get to the city. $4.45 is already too expensive, but that's way cheaper than fares from places like Franklin and Rodney. There are many communities who cannot afford to travel around our city now. Many are locked in our suburbs due to distance, income, or lack of access. Over 50% of those travelling across the harbour in the morning are in a bus. Can you imagine if half those bus users switched to their cars? The dramatic effect on emissions, congestion, and economic activity. If we cannot fund adequate services for the Eastern Busway and the City Rail Link, what was the point in investing in billions in those infrastructure projects in the first place? I also cannot comprehend why walking and cycling has become such a political football. People from all walks of life cycle and walk around our community. Most of them I see in my ward are kids, especially around school times, risking their lives to get to school. Imagine if we made it safer, how many more kids there'd be choosing those free modes of transport and freeing up the road for tradies, freight, and those who have no choice but to drive. Why does the GPS make kids the victim of the culture war that we're seeing right now? Future generations are begging us to make our streets safer, make the air cleaner, and play our part in climate change. Former Transport Minister Simon Bridges, who now chairs Waka Kotahi, put record funding into cycle infrastructure in Auckland. We have not seen that since. He said at the time that they were investing in cycling to give New Zealanders more opportunities to choose cycling, whether you commute to and from work, go to school, run errands, or get some exercise. He said when announcing the funding for cycling, we recognise the contribution cycling makes to healthier communities, and the safe and attractive cycling infrastructure can encourage people in urban areas to change their travel patterns. He said, that's why we're funding an integrated education program to help people understand the benefits of a bike-friendly country and the positive impacts on people riding bikes. Where is that leadership now? It should not be so controversial to let people have the choice to use safely the cheapest forms of transport around our communities. Kids should be able to walk and cycle to school safely. Aucklanders get up every day and make choices about how they travel around our city. Most still jump in their cars. Most days, they're stuck for hours in traffic. The more people who do that means the harder it gets for all of them to move around. But Aucklanders tell us time and again that if it's easy and if it's safe, they will walk and cycle for some of their trips, not all of them. And most say if it's affordable, easy and frequent, they'll get the bus, they'll get the train, or they'll get the ferry. Investing in public transport infrastructure and the services is doing the exact opposite of what Aucklanders want. It is the opposite of what every major city in the world is doing. We are losing talented New Zealanders to cities in Australia and all over the world where public transport is far better than it is here. I really hope the government will change this direction. I really hope the minister will change some of the things in the GPS. I understand some things will change and we will work with that. But right now, we need to build a modern, affordable, connected, safe transport system that all Aucklanders deserve. And I think the submission hits most of those points correctly. Kia ora.
Councillor Baker.
Oh, look, I'll stay away from making party political broadcasts, but I agree with the Mayor. We are here to support or otherwise the submission, and to not support it means that we accept it in its entirety, which I don't, and I accept that we don't make a submission, which is nuts. And so I accept and really want to do, again, acknowledge the work by the staff and those who have put this together. We need to also put a little bit of trust into the information and the knowledge that Auckland Transport have brought to this. It's a non-political thing for them. They are there to do as we direct. And so they are not here trying to create something for themselves. They are here to basically tell it as it is. And we need to put some trust into that. And, you know, they're not the great evil that some people like to make them out to be. So please accept this, vote for it. Let's get in front of the government, get our thoughts together and just move on with it. And you know, it's good to have it here, but let's just move on.
Okay, Councillor Foley.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if you can see me, but hopefully you can. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Like others, I'd like to start by just commending the staff. I think, you know, the time frame is not of our own making, and a lot of work has gone into the submission. And although we did only get it very recently, I did find it very easy to read and to follow, and I absolutely appreciate all of the hard work that's gone into the submission. Thank you also to Auckland Transport, to their officers and their board for working with our staff to get this across the line. I'd like to also commend the local boards. I've had a good chance to read through their feedback, and despite the short time frame as well, a lot of their feedback is very detailed and very specific, and so I really appreciate that. And I just wanted to toe-talk what the Mayor has said and what Councillor Baker has just said, that the balance is right. Of course, we won't all agree with every little part of it. Some parts I think we could go stronger on, for example, around the environment and around the public transport funding and things like that. But generally speaking, the balance is right in terms of the submission. And others won't agree with other parts of it. But like the Mayor has said, the whole submission in its whole, we should accept. And I'm going to vote in support of it. Kia ora. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Foley. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. I'm not going to support the submission because there's a lot of it that I don't actually agree with. And just on the safety with the speed humps, and I take up what our Mayor has been talking about with the speed humps, they are actually sometimes not really a safety tool. If you remember, yesterday we had the fire service that gave a very good submission, and it was about mainly speed humps, and the speed humps are actually causing delays for them to get to save people, and they're also destroying the vehicles. So that's some of the reason why I won't be. And the other thing is, as far as around the schools, I think you'll find that a lot of the parents don't agree with all these speed humps. There might be some of the schools, this might just be, you know, the school that is very close to me, we've got about 12 speed humps, and it's one of the quietest streets you could ever imagine, and I've never seen or heard of anybody that's ever been run over. We have one of our schools, Farm Cove Intermediate, I just want to give them a bit of a plug if I can. They don't allow their children to jaywalk. They have to walk to where there's any crossings. They have to walk to the pedestrian crossing, and if the parents are seen jaywalking, they get pulled up. So I think there's a whole lot of things we can do. We don't have to spend a lot of money on speed humps. We can actually just educate people to drive a bit better and to walk their children to school in a good manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Bartley.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this. I feel like a local board where we've got the power to govern, but we have to rely on higher up, I suppose, to actually do what we need to do for our communities. I do want to acknowledge the staff as well and the timeframes, and appreciate the long hours that they've had to work on this, to bring this to us to make a decision in public on this submission. And I appreciate their passion for this as well. I can see it very clearly. not only all of us sitting around the table trying to advocate for our communities, but it's coming from our officers, and I really do appreciate that. I support the submission. Of course, there's things in it that, you know, but hard to sit with, especially the economic focus, since we've just come out of a pandemic where we put the economy to one side and focused on people's lives. And it would be good if we did that here in regards to what's proposed around safety. I appreciate the local board's inputs as well, especially, you know, at short notice. I was in my local board meeting yesterday online and heard their resolution, so that again they're in support of the submission. I appreciate the submission, the officers putting in the bit that I sent through about not everybody has flexible working hours and has to use a car to get to work because there isn't any public transport options in their area. And so things are going to get harder for them once we start charging congestion tax, and yet there's no real investment in public transport infrastructure through this GPS that would have provided them with options, as well as the walking and cycling options, which see almost like it's set up to fail because they've got to provide demonstrated volumes of users. But how can you do that when you don't have the infrastructure in the first place? So I'm keeping it short. I don't have any strong point on the speed bumps. I just know that my niece and my nephew, they walk to school and, you know, slowing the traffic down is a benefit for their safety. I took a photo recently with someone from the retirement village in my area, an elderly person, because they were struggling to cross the road to catch a bus. So I see the benefits in both the elderly and the kids having infrastructure there to make it safer for them to get around. And then what people have said to us in the LTP submissions to make mokopuna decisions. And the majority of our city are actually under 15, over 300,000 of them. So that's how we should be making our decisions. And with them in mind, it is very hard to see how we can do that with what's proposed in this GPS, but this submission goes a long way to getting through, hopefully, some changes that will make it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartley. Councillor Williamson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I learnt a long time ago that in politics, if you go ahead and support things that have got lots of good bits and lots of bad bits, you'll get hung out to dry because you supported some wacky little element to something, even though you'd fought hard for all the good bits. So the balance isn't quite neutral on this stuff. I suggest that as a council, we should be doing one thing more than anything, is what are we trying to achieve with this submission? Because there are two paths you can go by in the old Led Zeppelin song. Do we want the government to listen and to make changes, or do we want to start preaching from the political pulpit, having speeches that make us feel good and excite ourselves about it, and have them listen to nothing? And I would suggest that if it's the first one, we want them to both listen and make changes to a GPS draft, then we would have been way better to have focused our intentions down onto the 3 or 4 key things that matter to this council, that would make a difference and that had a high probability that the government would listen and make change. But this is the most scattergun approach document I could see. This would have been perfect to have made a submission with the previous government was still in power and the GPS that they would have been following. I think this is tone deaf. I think this is totally tone deaf. And instead of saying we've got a new government that's taken a 180-degree turnaround, please also remember the numbers of what voters in Auckland. So I hear councillors around this time, well, I want to go with what the public think. The current government got way more percentage of the party vote they stood for in the Auckland zone than they did over the rest of New Zealand by a long way. I can give you the numbers, but it's about 56.7% compared to elsewhere in the 30s. And so what they were putting up as policy, which was a number of these things, was welcomed by the voters of Auckland. It has to have been because they voted for it. And I think we do ourselves a great disservice in supporting a piece of paper like this, which we get almost no time to do any work on, we get almost no time to develop some research and some response to, and is a scattergun approach where there are some really good bits and there are some really, really bad bits that make us look foolish to be supporting it. And so for that reason alone, it is not going to achieve the objective that I would like a document to do, and that is to get a government to listen, because they're wrong in some parts of this GPS that I'd like them to change. And we could have focused on those specifically and absolutely targeted, put a submission together and got a response that would have been all happy. We'd always say afterwards, wasn't it great we got the government to listen? If I was on the other side, and I have been a minister on the other side for many years on this, I would have looked at this submission and said that is just a scattergun approach, all things to all people, blowing in the wind. Let's put it to one side and let's try and find submissions that count. It's for that reason alone I will not be voting for this.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. Councillor Darby, you wanting to say something?
Thanks,
and then we'll go to Councillor Fletcher, and that should just about do it. Councillor Darby.
Thanks. I'll be supporting the recommendations before us in the submission. And I also want to acknowledge the concerted effort, the collaboration and alignment between the Auckland Transport staff and our Auckland Council Transport Strategy staff, the Auckland Transport Board, and now this governing body, this committee of the governing body, hopefully going to be signing up for this submission. I've been around transport planning for quite a long time, and I've seen numerous government policy statements or their equivalents and regional land transport plans being progressed. And I think since probably about 2005, I became involved, and each one has been, it's progressed Auckland, or in the case of the national planning document, a GPS or equivalent, it's progressed our nation in the transport space. I can't say that this draft GPS is going to progress the nation, let alone Auckland. It actually takes us back. And while I've heard some councillors say don't be political, I'm not being political here, I'm just being bluntly honest about what I see. That's all. That's all. And I would be saying this to whichever government was the parent of this document. Either one, either of the two major parties or any of their coalition partners. But this draft GPS appears to be written by someone who is very fondly holding on to the rear view mirror, looking at the past. The past is the past. We will not go back there. My plea to government is to dispense with the advisors that have brought you this advice. You can hire some of ours, and we've got some goodies. They're facing the future that Aucklanders are demanding. We know that our Aucklanders do not want to live in the 1960s. They might have been born there. I was born just a little bit before. I know the fondness I had for driving in the 1960s, or not me, maybe late 60s, 70s, but it is not our future. The great cities of the world are not drive me crazy cities. They are not. They are facing the future in the 21st century where public transport, modern transport systems based around public transport, walking and cycling, that is the system that our Aucklanders want to see delivered. This one will not. It looks like it's been inspired, this draft GPS, and I'm not going to put the criticism smack on the government here, but there are people advising the government who somewhat look like Automobile Association old boys, 1960s vintage, that have been resuscitated, sent on a junket to Miami, and they come back and write a GPS for Auckland. That's sort of what it looks like to me. The draft GPS does not face the transport future Auckland demands, let alone what Aucklanders demand. And that's got to be a world-beating transport system. This is not a world-beating transport system that we're heading towards here. This is a retrograde system. It's absolutely in denial of the future. I won't even mention climate change. Other councillors have referred to that. It doesn't lead us at all. It takes us back. If you look at bus, rail, light rail, ferry, infrastructure and services, it's miserable. It does not contribute at all. It takes away. It is mean on pedestrians walking in their neighbourhoods. It is equally miserable in making cycling to school safe. It should be. It has to be. And when it comes to safety, it is plain deadly. It is absolutely deadly. We will see more Aucklanders not make it home under this GPS as it's delivered in part for Auckland. More will die. And I treat safety on our transport network as my paramount responsibility as a councillor and also an Auckland Transport Director. We need to make sure that anybody who walks past their letterbox in the morning and is in the road network gets to walk past their letterbox in the evening and arrive home safely. This draft GPS, as it applies to Auckland, lessens that guarantee. This is a GPS that needs to be turned around, and I repeat my plea to the government to turn it around, turn it to face the future. That is my plea, and that is what our submission summarises as well, which I entirely support. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Newman.
Well, I'm angry. I'm just so angry at how this, what should have been an additive process, has, in my view, devolved into a political slugfest. That's how I interpret it. I've listened and I was going to go and support the submission without any condition this morning. And I thought, well, you know, then I heard a reflection about the roads of national significance. I thought, well, look, I don't feel that I could have confidence in relation to the key recommendations for the Integrated Transport Plan 1 and 2 and the appendices because of the way in which that was framed. And I say that as somebody who does read the evidence, actually, because I was part of that process in relation to the NOR for what is one of the roads of national significance. I've had to observe the framing of these matters on social media. A 5-lane corridor, that's 5 lanes one way, that is never going to happen. I have read the draft GPS in relation to the roads of national significance, 4-lane grade separated highways. Now, the truth of the matter is, Mr. Chair, I would have thought the recommendation should have been we will incorporate the RONs into the ITP, but there are caveats for that we need to address. It needs to address, for example, the fact that the consequential OPEX, the renewals and maintenance, needs to be picked up by government, that the substructure around drainage needs to be addressed. I have been through these. There have been people around here who have celebrated the walking back, the dumping of projects by the previous minister, who is now no longer in Parliament, and instead said that, well, we can't actually address some of those critical arterial corridors that accommodate growth, address safety, and have significant environmental features that would be to the benefit of the community for which that will be located. Improving resilience, addressing stormwater, and we can't say anything positive about that in our submission. We can't say anything about that. Instead, I have to listen to speeches from people who have no place involving themselves in debates for which they haven't been part of through the NOR process, actually. So I'm at a quandary, Mr. Chairman, because I accept that the Mayor wants to put in a submission that reflects the sum of all parts, some which are good, some which are not. I'm really at a quandary because I'd like to think that I try and just accommodate things even if I can't. And it leads me to the conclusion, Chair, that if this process, if this submission is about knocking over a GPS and trying to stick a thumb in the eye of the government, then I need to record my vote against that. And maybe the solution for me is to lodge my own submission separately, which is, you know, I've been encouraging people to do so. Maybe I'll abstain. I probably will vote against the whole thing because at its heart, this debate today has not been helpful. This debate today has been political. And my final comment, Mr. Chair, will be to Auckland Transport. I would suggest that the officials from Auckland Transport support their own evidence for which they have placed on the public record previously as part of a judicial planning process. And if they're not aware of that, well, it's available. It's informed the NORs around the RONs, or at least one of them. And I think that if the government is prepared to come along and pay for that, then good. And if the officials are not prepared to be part of that conversation because they no longer support their advice, then I think they need to reflect that back to the Auckland Transport Board. Because some of us do follow the evidence, and the evidence is clear, and Mr. Kimpton will need to be aware of that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. I was listening to Radio New Zealand this morning, and one of the speakers that Catherine Ryan had used a quote that it gives me a lot of time to think, and that is that perfection is the enemy of the good. And that was Voltaire. And what he was getting at is, so often we strive so hard to be so jolly perfect that we end up doing nothing. And nothing is more apparent to me than the polarisation that I've seen in my years in politics over transport, which is something I feel really passionate about. So what I've watched over the years is, you know, and as somebody who was very keen on light rail, actually got involved in purchasing some property for it from the inner city through to Mount Roskill. We were so busy striving for perfection that we ended up doing nothing. Now, to me today, I'm really sick of the shroud waving I'm hearing. And it's from all sides, you know, it's a lot of shroud waving where we all hold the moral high ground. We all have such enlightened views of the world that if you just don't listen to whomever it might be, the world's all going to come to an end. Well, I don't think that's the case. This is a cycle that happens every 3 years. It's like a very long pregnancy, you know, a long gestation. And this is really the first step in it. We're also trying to navigate a first step with a government that has come in, that is still coming to grips with a whole lot of issues, but I think is well-intentioned. I sat and watched on Sunday morning, I think it was, Q&A, while we still have some public broadcasting. I watched Simeon Brown. Now, I was really impressed. He was pushed pretty hard by Jack Tame, quite properly, and I didn't like all Simeon's answers, but what struck me was he was calm, he was unflappable, and he was willing to listen. And I feel really good about that. I know that the Mayor is in regular dialogue with him, and I think we've got a submission together that isn't going to please everybody, but it is a submission that is the first step in a journey of building a relationship with the good and the bad and the ugly. We've got to, as the Mayor perhaps pointed out, we have to recognise, you know, we need to work with our funders. That's both the ratepayers and also the government and all the other parties. So I'm actually not trying to suggest that this submission is perfect, because perfection is very difficult to achieve. I think this submission is a really good opportunity for us to show the alignment that is there between Auckland Transport and the council. It's good that we're submitting together. I think it's respectful towards government. I think it is balanced and it's consistent as we approach the issues it's not inflammatory in any particular way. It has been a huge body of work. And I really, as others have done, want to acknowledge all of those who've worked so hard on it. I also want to acknowledge, and I speak on behalf of the chair here too, our director, Barry Potter, because he's helped guide us, and he's absolutely helped us at times find that delicate pathway where we need to bring parties together. But I am particularly indebted to the amount of work that has been undertaken by both Auckland Transport and Auckland Council officers. And I want to say to you, this is no time for extremes. This is not a time for anything other than what is going to take Auckland forward. And the weighting that we have put, I think, is sufficiently strong on recognising that we want in Auckland Tamaki Makaurau, we want to be able to work more constructively with government on that integrated transport plan. And in working on that integrated transport plan, we will be able to come back through all of those issues that you've raised on whichever side of the argument you might happen to be. I'm going over time. But we need to have something that's going to work for everyone, whether it's children, and we all have children and grandchildren, I have lots, whether it's freight, you know, we all rely on things being delivered to us, whether it's cars or public transport or whatever. Somehow or another, we're going to have to come together with all of the difficulties and funding challenges that the government and the country are facing right now, and find a place for balance. And I think that this is a good first step. And I do want to applaud the officers who have worked with us constructively, and to thank the chair because there was a desire to have this debate in public, and I think it was proper that we did so, and I hope that the majority of you can support this submission today.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher, and I don't think the Mayor will be requiring his right of reply. Mr Mayor, no?
No, not really. I just sum it by saying it is a very reasonable submission, and failure to offer a submission will be a massive black mark in the work we've been doing to get recognised as a regional government, as a partner and with the government and doing things. So just consider what you're about to do here, and try and not be angry. I can't imagine being angry about this.
The reason I asked you your right to reply, because I was just going to make a quick commentary myself, so I won't take that as a right of reply, but I'll be about 1 minute, because I think that's all I'll require.
John?
Yeah?
It's Councillor Sayers online. Sorry, I did have my hand up and it was acknowledged, but I was wondering if you wanted to take me before you summated, that was all.
Yeah, okay then, Councillor Sayers, where are you going?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think if a councillor's not going to support this, then it sends a very poor message to a minister. Putting myself in the minister's shoes, when he gets this, if it's not unanimous, it obviously will raise some question marks in their heads. Councillors have the right now during the debate to register any concerns they have, and they can be noted. I would have hoped that there would have been unanimous support for those reasons, and therefore just signalling that I will be voting in favour of this, because we have to give some sort of feedback, Chair, and this is our opportunity to do it. And also the perception that a minister might have as a result of a non-unanimous vote here may well influence perceptions and decision making and partnershiping opportunities in terms of us wanting to develop our own regional transport plan and strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sayers. So I'll final little 1 minute effort from myself, and I've listened very carefully to both well, I wouldn't say sides, but different contributions that have come around the table. Thank people for that. But I thought that what I would do, as I used to do at university, was always go to the executive summary that in some cases saved you doing a lot of reading, but I have read this document. But in this case, I think the summary summed it up perfectly, and it basically said, Auckland Council broadly supports many of the strategic priorities highlighted in the draft GPS. So for the people that had concerns about the majority or the broad content, that's not really borne out by that statement. There are concerns that, as the Council for Aucklanders, that we do need to bring up, and I think we have identified those. The reduction in funding to public transport services. I don't want to see significant increases in fares. They're too high as they are. Any city in the world that has a successful public transport system, an important component of that is reasonable price fares and offerings. So if anything, we have to do more of lower fares rather than more of higher fares, because that's going to be counterproductive. So we're quite right in bringing that up. Similarly, with the approaches to reducing, I guess, emissions, again, if you look at any number of cities in the world, that they are light years ahead of us with electrification of vehicles, of use of public transport, of active modes, etc., etc. That is what cities in the world are doing now, and the progressive ones, of which there are very many. So we have to be part of that, and we're already along that road. So we need to signal that on behalf of our constituents. And I guess finally, and it goes to the notion of the government here. Auckland Council looks forward to working closely with the government to address Auckland's transport challenges and advance our joint transport priorities, particularly through the ITP. So what we're also signalling here is we understand this GPS is for the nation as a whole, but Auckland has its own specific challenges as the biggest city. And we're looking forward to working with the government. It is a new government, it comes in with a clear mandate, but we have a duty to point out what our concerns are, and I think we've done that in a reasonably balanced way. But more importantly, going forward as a consequence of this process, we hope the government will pick up. It's a submission process. They're there to listen, and we'll hope that they will pick up some of these key points, and what's more, that it'll be a further springboard for future and ongoing discussions, as I'm sure the Minister will be keen to have, Minister Brown. I'm absolutely sure of that. So, it's been seconded. All those in favour? Aye. Okay, if we want to have a division, then let's go to division. Councillor Stewart called for a division.
Councillor Baker?
Aye.
Councillor Bartley? Yes. Member Brown?
Aye.
Member Brown?
Yes, please.
Councillor Darby?
For.
Councillor Ferry?
For.
Councillor Fletcher?
Yes.
Councillor Foley?
Yes.
Councillor Henderson?
Yes.
Councillor Hills?
Aye, thank you.
Councillor Lee?
Abstain.
Councillor Lee Yoni?
Yes.
Councillor Newman?
Mr. Chairman, I've emailed the officers. I'm going to vote yes, but I have written to the officers and to you to indicate that I wish my vote to be recorded against the ITP recommendations at Roman numerals 1 and 2 in attachment B for the 3 reasons that I have set out, and that I would wish that have my opposition to 1 and 2 in attachment B and the reasons for my opposition to be recorded.
Okay, so you're voting for it and you're wanting that to be recorded, Councillor Newman, is that
Well, the
correct?
reasons why I'm voting against Roman numerals
Yeah,
1
we
and
just
2.
need to record what you're voting, what you're not, you're voting against, okay? And he's got, that's been handed? Okay, continue with the call.
Member Renata? Yeah. Councillor Sayers?
For.
Councillor Stewart? Councillor Turner?
Against.
Councillor Walker?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Against.
And Chair?
For.
And that's carried.
That's
16 to 3.
carried 16 votes to 3. Thank you for that item today, for everyone's participation in it. And
Mr Chairman, can I make a quick comment about the next meeting? There's a REV workshop that was scheduled to be here in an hour's time.
yeah,
We've moved it back to level 26.
okay,
So anyone that's attending REV should be at 26
Okay.
and 1:45.
all right. Thank you everyone for your attendance today. Go out and have a joy.
Thank you, Chair.